The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
On this week's Court TV podcast, a colossal true crime story finally goes to trial. The Doomsday cult mom murder trial, Idaho versus Lori Vallow Daybell. Her and her husband, Chad Daybell, will stand trial separately for 3 murders. Lori's 2 young children, Vallow and Tylee Ryan, and Chad's late wife, Tammy Daybell. The state alleges that the motive lies in a desire for sex, money, and power, in addition to an obsession with end times prophecies. Court TV's Chanley Painter joins me from Boise, Idaho, as we unpack the biggest moments so far from the case against Lori Vallow Daybell.
This is the Court TV podcast with Vinnie Politan.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for downloading the Court TV podcast special episode this week. There is a huge trial we are covering in Idaho, and it's a case that you won't see any of the testimony on Court TV, but you will hear it. It's because the judge has banned cameras from the courtroom. So it's the perfect trial for a podcast. It's the case involving a woman named Lori Daybell. Some call her Lori Vallow Daybell, and some just call her the Doomsday cult mom. She's accused of murdering her 2 children and also conspiring to murder the first wife of her 5th husband. Her 5th husband is Chad Daybell. He is the so-called Doomsday prophet. His wife died. Lori's husband was shot and killed by her brother. Then her children disappeared, and they were found buried in Chad's backyard. Yeah, I know it's a lot, folks. It's a lot. This is a very complicated, layered story that is absolutely fascinating, and we are covering it every day on Court TV and every night on my show, and helping us cover it because we don't have cameras in there. We need someone who can see what is actually happening. Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter is in Boise, Idaho, and she joins us now on the podcast. Chanley, this is the most difficult trial to try to summarize. You just can't summarize this one.
You can't. It's complicated. There's lots of twists and turns, years of evidence, and it's a circumstantial case, Vinnie. So all these pieces to the puzzle that prosecutors are having to put together for this jury to make sense. And I remember when I was we first started doing this story almost 3 years ago, it was, okay, Chanley, you're going to take the lead on the Daybell saga. Then I spent like 2 full weekends just trying to wrap my head around the facts in this case. And then that was 3 years ago. So we have 3 more years of developments as well.
It's really unreal. So there's a lot of dead people. There's 2 dead spouses. There's 2 dead children. There's a dead brother. There's a dead prior husband. There's a lot of things that have happened here. But let's get into the trial, because I think something that is going pretty well for prosecutors is that they've tried to make this case more simple, more straightforward, and with definitive themes about trying to summarize and explain to this jury what this case is about. Let's take a listen.
Money, power, and sex. That's what this case is about. The defendant, Lori Vallow Daybell, used money, power, and sex, or the promise of those things, to get what she wanted. What she wanted was money, power, and sex. It didn't matter what obstacles she had to remove to get what she wanted. It didn't matter if the obstacle was a thing or a person. And if it was a person, it didn't matter who. Tylee Ryan was a vibrant young woman, 17 years old, a whole life ahead of her. She was just about to enter into adulthood and make her own way in the world. Who knows what she would have become? Tylee had already lost her father, and she received Social Security benefits because of that. Tylee had money. Lori wanted it. Tylee's gone. Joshua Jackson Vallow, lovingly known by friends and family as JJ, was a 7-year-old, vibrant, happy-go-lucky little boy. He had most of his childhood and his whole life ahead of him. But JJ was tough. He's a 7-year-old. He took a lot of time and effort and energy to care for. That time, effort, and energy took away from the defendant doing what she wanted to do, and from the defendant being with Chad Daybell and devoting her time and attention to him.
I love the way she lays it out. Chanley, let's go through this theme of money, power, and sex that the prosecution is laying out here for the jury. Let's start with the sex. Who is it that Lori Vallow Daybell, according to prosecutors, wants to have sex with?
Chad Daybell, the prolific author and married man, father of 5.
So he's married with children. She's married with children. Her husband gets shot and killed by her brother. His wife tragically dies, and they marry. So so they end up, I guess, having the sex, and probably had it before they got married, I would think, especially since there's testimony of them making out on the campus of Brigham Young University.
Right.
How about that? How about that image, folks? So where does the money come into play? How is there a monetary incentive here for her, according to prosecutors, to commit and conspire to commit these murders?
Before I answer that, first of all, Vinny, they must have been watching your show over the years, because you had this pegged from the beginning of what this case was really about, right? Sex and greed. And they're the first words out of their mouth, the prosecutors, money, sex, and power. So the money comes into play for why Tylee and JJ would be more beneficial to her, dead than alive, in that she was collecting nearly $6,000 a month in Social Security benefits from JJ and his father's death, Charles Vallow, and Tylee and her father's death, Joseph Ryan, and then she also herself received some from Charles Vallow's death. So she was going to pocket some money, plus a life insurance policy. She believed that Charles Vallow had a $1 million life insurance policy. Much to her surprise, he had already switched it over to his sister Kay. And same with Tammy Daybell, Chad Daybell's wife. On the day that prosecutors say Tylee Ryan was murdered, Chad Daybell is calling the life insurance company for his wife, maximizing it to $430,000.
How about that? So it's old fashioned. Now, people would argue just get divorced, but the problem is if you have children, they cost money too. So there's a negative flow when you're raising children. Every parent knows that. But there were Social Security payments, as you said, coming to the kids because they had lost their fathers. And so when the children disappeared and were actually dead and buried in her new husband's backyard, she continued to collect those payments.
She did. So between October 2019 to February 2020, when she was arrested finally in Hawaii, she collected, I believe it was more than $22,000 after the deaths of her children, pocketing all that, which is the basis for the grand theft charges she's been indicted for in this trial. That's why the jury's hearing about the money part as motive, and also because she stole, allegedly, all this money.
So where does the power come into play? So we've got the sex, right? She gets her husband and her kids out of the way so she can go to Hawaii to have this life with the man that she's just enthralled with, the prophet Chad. Where's the power?
So the power comes in that, again, this is a conspiracy case. They allege that while Lori was not the one who physically murdered her own children, she manipulated, coerced, and ordered it for her brother to carry it out, Alex Cox. He had a power over him. And the testimony has been very clear inside the courtroom, the power she had and Chad over Zulema Pastenes and Melanie Gibb and Melanie Boudreau or Pulowski, her niece, these followers. And it really does seem like a cult. The more testimony unfolds inside this courtroom, this power that they had over people and these extreme beliefs and making them feel like they belonged. And to the point that Alex Cox would do anything Lori said or Chad said, Vinny.
So they're creating this world. So Lori Daybell's creating this world for herself where now she has a level of importance because she's got followers. She's got money from the death of her new husband's wife, and they've got money flowing from the kids who no longer are there. You don't have to pay for them. You don't have to take care of them, and you're getting their Social Security benefits. And she's sort of living this new life for herself. So putting all of that together, did they have some sort of master plan? Have prosecutors laid out a master plan that this couple had?
Well, in the opening statements, Prosecutor Lindsay Blake of Fremont County, she did talk about the plan to do away with any obstacle that stood in the way of money, power, and sex. They have not really framed it in the work of this. They're going to be the prophets leading the 144,000, although we've heard testimony of that. But that's not how the prosecutors framed it. This was more about, lust and greed, not so much about we have this divine task, mission by God, as she is a goddess, Chad Daybell as a prophet, to lead the 144,000. Doomsday was supposed to happen, remember, in July 2020. It came and went.
Well, it sort of did with COVID. It almost did with COVID. Doomsday almost came, right. But now it's gone. It came and went. So, okay. So I think we did a good job here of working through the way prosecutors are presenting this very complicated factual scenario and breaking it down into these themes, which to me makes sense. It makes sense. Here's a woman who's using her sexuality to get the man she wants in bed, and they've got some money. They run off to Hawaii, and they've got followers who will listen to what they say and listen to what the prophet is telling them. This is it doesn't make sense to like in the real world, but it makes sense in terms of what actually happened here, which is still tough to believe. So let's flip the coin over. Let's take a listen now to Lori Daybell's defense team and their opening.
The evidence will show she had a particular interest in religion in the end of times. You will recognize the quote-unquote end of times as something spoken of in the Holy Bible, the New Testament. Most of you will understand when I say that. Some people could care less about biblical prophecies. Some people care a lot about it. Thankfully, in this country, we get to worship how we choose. The evidence will show that once Lori and her friends met Chad Daybell, an author on religious subjects, her beliefs began to morph and to change. And that's where you come into this story, because the stories diverge.
Okay. He's not very excited about it, but he is telling us a story. So,
and he kind of reminds me of Chad Daybell's monotone.
Yeah. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it's an Idaho thing. Maybe it works. Maybe you can mesmerize this jury. But they're pointing the finger at Chad Daybell a little bit as being the one who sort of changes Lori. So where do we see the defense going in this case? What is their real defense to all of this? Because she is found in Hawaii, right? She doesn't tell anyone where her kids are. The kids are missing. They're dead and buried in her new husband's backyard. So where do we think they're really going with this whole thing?
It's not super clear inside the courtroom. Based on their opening statements, essentially they're saying, don't blame Lori for what Chad may have done or what Alex may have done. And so far on what cross we have seen, which has picked up on week 3, because the evidence, again, cell phone, digital data, is pointing to Alex Cox. He was the one. His phone was pinging over the grave sites of the children in Chad Daybell's backyard. So they're more aggressively trying to point that out. So that could be the direction that they're going. Interesting when he said, once she met Chad, her beliefs started to expand. And so that seems to think they're blaming him on how extreme it did become. We shall see, Vinnie.
And Alex Cox is her brother. He shot, and we know this for a fact, that he shot and killed her husband, Charles Vallow. He claimed self-defense. The case was still being investigated. Lori's been charged in that murder now in Arizona. That didn't happen in Idaho. Alex Cox, though, had an episode on the toilet and he ended up dying. So he's not around. So he's a dead person you could point the finger at. But they had an interesting relationship, Lori and Alex. I mean, through the years, like he's followed her wherever she lives. He sort of shows up and is there. And there are stories about what these two would do. It was kind of a bizarre relationship. You notice how I left it there, Chanley, to see if you were going to give the details? Because I don't know if I want to.
Thanks, Vinny. I'll do the honors here. But yes, Alex Cox's prior wife, she actually was so concerned that she went to the Chandler, Arizona Police Department after Charles Vallow was shot by Alex to report the bizarre, unusual, weird relationship that Alex had with Lori, in that, while she was married to Alex Cox, his ex-wife, that they would simulate sex acts. They would openly talk about their sex life. It made her so uncomfortable, led to the demise of her marriage to Alex Cox.
And that's brother and sister, Lori and
right.
Alex, brother and sister, simulating sex acts. And my understanding is they did it in front of their parents too.
Yes. Apparently it was very open family life where you would talk about your intimate relations in front of everyone. And what's interesting then, he's actually caught up with Lori and Alex's uncle, Rex Connor here. And he mentioned the dark humor of the family. So it was just an odd family.
And Alex was a comedian. He was a comedian. He did stand up. And one of his stand up routines, he jokes about Lori's third husband shocking him with a stun gun and then going to jail for that. It's a bizarre tale, and it's a strange relationship, but it's really crucial to this entire thing. I wanted to play a testimony from Kay Woodcock because she is such an important part in this whole story. If it wasn't for Kay Woodcock and her husband Larry, they're JJ's grandparents, I don't think we would be here talking about this trial. They are the ones. Let's listen to Kay.
Did you ever do interviews with news outlets to publicize the search for JJ?
Objection, relevancy.
What's the relevance, Mr. Wood?
Just to lay the foundation of what Mrs. Woodcock was doing, looking for a missing child, Your Honor.
The objection's overruled. You can answer.
When we went in January of 2020, the media had learned of the story of the kids missing, and we reached out. Every media outlet was all over this, and we talked to every outlet we could. We appeared on talk shows. We did everything we could to raise awareness for the kids missing.
And she has testified, her husband Larry, not on the list, but has been in the courtroom. How are they holding up the grandparents? Because they're the ones who alerted police that we haven't heard from our grandson. They live in Louisiana, and JJ was living in Idaho with Lori. And that's when the search began, wellness check, and then Lori got up and left and fled to Hawaii. So how are they holding up, Larry and Kay?
Inside the courtroom, of course, emotions run high every time JJ Vallow's name is mentioned or how he passed away. They comfort each other. They are here every day. Now, they will sit outside on the more graphic testimonies. When the lead detective was on the stand talking about, how JJ was found in Chad Daybell's backyard, they opted not to be in the courtroom for obvious reasons. And I mean, it's Vinny, I know you've been in lots of courtrooms also, but when you have a victim's family and you see them in the hallway, or you see them coming or going from the courthouse or inside the courtroom during a recess or break, it's incredible how they're trying to encourage everyone else. We're trying to comfort them, are you okay? And they're making sure everyone else is okay. That's the kind of people the Woodcocks are.
Wow. That's pretty amazing, because it's a tough spot. It's a tough spot in the courtroom when it's your little grandson who is the victim, and you've got to endure hearing all the details about what happened. And what happened to JJ is really unthinkable, unspeakable. Here's Detective Hermosillo describing how they found JJ when he was buried in Chad's backyard.
They cut the seal on the body bag and unzipped the body bag, and it revealed the black plastic bag that had the duct tape. He placed that bag onto the metal table. It still had dirt on it from when we had taken it out of the ground. They took photographs, did whatever they need to do, and they cut down the center of the black plastic bag.
Okay. When they cut down that plastic bag, what did you observe?
I saw a little boy in red pajamas. He had a white plastic bag around his head, several layers of duct tape from his chin to his forehead area. His arms were duct tape with several layers of duct tape. His arms were folded like this across his chest. You guys see that? His feet were also duct taped and bound. He had a white and blue child's blanket placed on top of him.
A moment of reality inside this courtroom, this bizarre case with these bizarre facts. But this is the bottom line. Little JJ bound, buried, murdered. We're going to continue our discussion. Chanley Painter is with us. When we come back, we're going to take you inside the world of Lori Daybell and her beliefs as a couple of her friends / followers testify against her.
Everyday people caught up in a plan to commit murder.
Did you kill your mother?
Yes, I did. The ultimate betrayals, friends and family turning on each other.
Spell was broken when the handcuffs went click.
But just who is the puppet and who's pulling the strings?
Accomplice to Murder with Vinnie Politan premieres May 7th.
Only on Court TV.
Did Lori ever indicate anything about having a special mission here on Earth?
Yes.
And what did she tell you about that?
She felt that she was part of the 144,000, and then as she developed her relationship with Chad, she felt like they were the head leaders of it.
And when you talk about the 144,000, can you explain a little bit about what that would mean?
It's reference from Scripture and the Bible and the Doctrine and Covenants about a group of 144,000 that would be here during the return of our Savior, and they would help do a great mission of missionary work throughout the world. And they would have, a lot of a spiritual endowment from on high.
So if someone were to be the head of that 144,000, would that be a pretty high calling?
Absolutely.
Would that be a position of pretty significant power?
Yes.
Power. There's the power theme. Chanley Painter still with us. Chanley, that's Melanie Gibb testifying for the state, such a crucial witness in this case, an insider. Give us a little background about Melanie Gibb and her connection to Lori.
So Melanie Gibb met Lori Vallow Daybell in Arizona in 2018, and they attend this Preparing the People conference together where they first meet Chad. But I believe they met at, the Mormon church, and they had some commonalities. They hit it off, and they were best friends, so close. Melanie was a part of this inner circle. She was the up-close eyewitness to everything Lori and Chad from fall 2018 to, their arrest.
So would you describe Melanie Gibb as a follower of Chad? Was she part of this inner circle? And I'm trying to figure out exactly how this group functioned and related to one another.
So based on the testimony the jury's been hearing in the courtroom, now when Melanie Gibb was on the stand, she basically taught the jurors all of these fringe beliefs of Chad and Lori. But she would distance herself as far as she believed 100% was sold out. She said she always had this sort of hesitation. She didn't have the confirmation from the Spirit as they did. That's how it came across in the courtroom. But if you listen to like Zulima's testimony, Melanie was always there. She was always helping recruit members to be a part of this 144,000. Like April Raymond's testimony, Melanie was there at that lunch with April Raymond to recruit her to leave her children behind and her husband to be a part of this group. So it's a little contradictory from whether or not Melanie Gibb was, maybe third in line, or if she was just someone who was kind of hesitant, went along with it because she felt included and wanted to be friends with Lori.
It's amazing, right? And recruiting people to be part of this group and this following, and yet there seems to be a theme of to be a part of the group. You can't be with your children. You can't be with your spouse. That makes no sense. That makes no sense. That's where the break is, right? Because if it was like, hey, it's a religion, yeah, it's a little bit on the fringe, but people are entitled to believe what they want. But when that belief,
unless your spouse was a part of the 144,000,
but could you bring the kids is the question. Can you bring the kids? Are they going to be invited, or they got to be out of the way? That's where you run into the conflict between, exercising and practicing some form of whatever religion you believe. And then it turns into the harm. And here the harm is to spouses and children who apparently weren't part of this 144,000. Let's listen to Melanie Gibb here talk about Lori describing to her the relationship between Lori and husband number 5, Chad Daybell.
Do you recall Lori telling you anything in November regarding she and Chad's relationship?
Yes.
And what did she tell you?
She told me that they had been married, I believe, 4 or 5 times. And she would go into different details with me about who she was, what character she was, and what character he was.
Do you recall if she said anything to you about going to the temple?
Yes.
And what did she tell you regarding going to the temple?
She would tell me that, yes, that weekend that he came to Arizona, that they met in the temple together, and they were somewhere in there, like in just like maybe a waiting area room, that they were sealed together by, I believe Moroni was there, and possibly, I believe she said Jesus Christ, and that relationship they had multiple lives, it was kind of like a reunited again when they got to be sealed there. It wasn't in a sealing room officially done by the church or anything like that.
And can you explain a little bit about the relevance of being sealed?
The teachings of our church talk about when you're sealed to a companion on this earth, that you are sealed for time and all eternity.
And when you say the teachings of our church, are you comfortable sharing what church you're a member of?
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
I'm sure some members of the LDS not happy about that testimony. We know they've had their fingerprints on this case in terms of writing letters and trying to get people to be not involved and trying to keep the LDS out of this trial. But the LDS is part of this trial, as we heard from the testimony of Melanie Gibb. This is where it starts. And if the beliefs then extend beyond the LDS beliefs, they do, because they start talking about zombies, et cetera. But this is the basis of all this. So this sealing, Chanley, this is taking place, it seems, while both are still married, or is it just Chad is married to Tammy and Charles is dead? Do we have the time frame of this sealing where these two who've been married 5 times before playing other characters are now sealed?
I'm trying to remember the exact time that they were in the temple sealed. I believe it was before Tammy died. I'll confirm that date, but it was definitely before they were actually married in Hawaii. So they are in the temple.
Yeah, it seems like Tammy would have to be alive because Tammy dies and within 17 days they're married in Hawaii. So this had to have happened beforehand. And you think of Lori Daybell, like she's saying, well, we were married 5 other times. Plus, she's on like her 5th husband. This is amazing how many times one woman could be married.
Vinny, I found it. So it's 2 weeks after they met.
2 weeks after they met. So that means her husband's alive, his wife is alive, yet they are sealed together. That's wow. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. That speaks volumes. There's the sex part, folks. There's the sex part. Disguised as religion. All right. Let's get now to the darkness. Melanie Gibb here describing some of the beliefs and how it goes from, hey, I've got like a husband, I've got children, to all of a sudden that now they need to go. Let's listen.
Do you recall Lori ever telling you about a light and dark scale?
Yes.
Did she ever explain to you what the light and dark scale was?
She did.
And what did she tell you regarding that?
She told me that people that were light were people that before they came to this planet, when we lived in a pre-mortal realm, basically our spirits lived there before we physically came here, that those that signed contracts and made agreements with the Savior were light, and those that were dark were those that signed contracts with Satan.
Do you recall when she first started telling you about light and dark? The light and dark scale?
It was sometime after she met Chad, that few weeks, when she met him. I would say probably pretty immediate. It feels like it was like it could have been possibly that weekend or just days after that, after she met him. I
want to play some testimony from Zulema Pastanez, who is another one of these insiders. This is a woman who ends up marrying Lori's brother, Alex Cox. Here she is describing, and Tylee and JJ are the 2 children of Lori. Here's now where we've diverged from religion into some dark place involving demons and zombies, etc. Let's listen.
Did you ask where Tylee was?
Yes.
And what did Lori tell you about where Tylee was?
She said she had to be free.
Okay. So she had told you prior to the move to Rexburg that JJ too was being attacked by demons.
Correct.
Okay. What did she say about whether Tylee was being attacked by demons or evil spirits?
Right before she moved to Rexburg, she said that Tylee had been possessed by evil spirit or a demon, and she called it Hillary.
Hillary was the evil spirit. All right, Chanley, so this is a theme, right? People turn dark, according to Lori, and then all of a sudden they end up dead.
Yep. So, and this, again, these beliefs espoused soon after meeting Chad Daybell, according to the testimony, where people were light or dark, and it began with Charles Vallow being dark. Charles Vallow apparently had about 3 or 4 dark spirits taking over his body. They would conduct these elaborate castings, the jury now so familiar with. And they would cast one demon out, Vinny, but another one would take over his body. So we went from Ned Schneider to Garrett to Hiplos, the most evil dark spirit. And then finally, God delivered Hiplos to Lori and Alex, according to what she texted after Charles's death. And then the same with JJ and Tylee were both inhabited by dark spirits. And then suddenly, 2 weeks before Tammy Daybell's death, she was inhabited by a dark spirit, Vinny, Viola.
And this is the connection. We bring it back now to the trial. This is a conspiracy case. They're not saying that Lori actually physically killed anyone, but conspired with her brother and her 5th husband, Chad, to commit the murders of these 3 people, 3 innocent people. And this is where the conspiracy comes in, that she is part of this. She is labeling them as zombies and then having Alex take care of it. All right, we've got more to get to. When we come back, we're going to hear what may be the most important and significant evidence in the case. It is Lori's oldest child, who's an adult, her son, Colby. He's the one child who's not dead, was not living with her at the time. But after his sister and brother are found buried in her new husband's backyard, he talks to her on the phone, confronts her, and really cross-examines his own mother. It's a recording the jury heard, and you will hear it next.
Go ahead and judge me. The whole world has. The whole world has judged me. They don't know, and you don't know. You don't know what I've been through, and you don't even give a crap what they've been through. Nobody does. Except for me. I'm the one that knows. I'm the one that was in the hospital with Tylee for hundreds of days watching her suffer. I'm the one that was there doing everything with JJ every day. I was the one who did it all these years.
You did it all to throw it in the garbage. They're not.
You don't know what happened. You don't get what happened.
It doesn't matter what happened if they're buried in your new husband's backyard. Tell me that matters what happened. You tell me that you did this in Jesus' name, Mom.
Wow. Powerful stuff. That's Colby Ryan, Lori Daybell's oldest son, going after his mom, calling her a murderer. Chanley, tell us about this moment inside the courtroom and tell us the significance of the testimony of Colby Ryan.
Yeah, Vinnie, so far, the biggest moment of the trial, her own son taking the stand. He wouldn't look at her until the very beginning. He's handed a photo to identify, and he glares over to his mother sitting there, who was just wanting, like, you could just tell, look at me. You know, she was longingly, lovingly looking at her son, and he glares over to her and goes, that's my sister, Tylee. And then they show her picture of Tylee and then of JJ. And then it culminated with this jailhouse phone call. It's agonizing to listen to. He's saying things that I've talked to other family members, wish they could have said to Lori Vallow. And he's sitting there in the courtroom. The jury is leaning in. They're listening to this unfold. Lori is really not reacting while the phone calls play, but there's a moment in this call where she laughs at him. And in that moment in the courtroom, Colby just darts his eyes over to his mom and glares at her again for the second time. Only twice he looks over to his mother's to glare at her. And I mean, wow. My jaw was on the floor listening to this. I thought, wow. I mean, he is telling her what I'm sure prosecutors want to say in closing arguments, Vinnie.
Absolutely. And that's what every viewer would want to do that has been following all of this, and every listener, to confront Lori Daybell, because she may not testify. You know, she has the right to testify. It'll be her decision. Right. We'll see if that moment happens. But prosecutors actually don't need that moment now because they got it. So much more real when it's the son, own flesh and blood, believing that his own mother is the murderer of his brother and sister. To me, that is incredibly persuasive. It gives the jury permission to believe that a mother could do this because her own son believes that she could do this. Mm-hmm. So really, really such an important part of this entire case. Speaking of Lori in the courtroom, how would you describe her demeanor inside? And is there any change when the jury's there and when the jury's not there?
You know, there really isn't a change in her demeanor. That's interesting. A lot of times with defendants, we'll see a change once the jury walks in. So she arrives into court with, before the jury gets there, the judge, and she's with her attorney. She's smiling, she's chatting, she's leaning over. She's even leaning over to the front row of the gallery where the defense investigator is, talking to him. And she'll do the same thing with the jury in there during a break or a sidebar or a testimony. She's leaning over, chatting, whispering. She'll smile. She'll sometimes smirk. And sometimes she looks pretty serious. Today, with her sister Summer in the courtroom for the first time this week, Vinnie, she seemed a little more demure, not as outgoing, smiling and chatty. For example, this morning she sat with her back towards the gallery for the first time I've seen in 3 weeks. Interesting. She is unlike any criminal defendant we've ever seen at Court TV. And the only time she really showed emotion was when Colby was on the stand. When he was being crossed about, she was a good mother growing up. She did have some tears in her eyes. And to me, again, that reveals, she was
deemed not competent to stand trial a few months ago, a year ago. I'm trying to put the time together here. But it appears to me from every description that you've given and the way she's acting and reacting, it's all, it sort of makes sense. Like she's cognizant. She understands what's happening. She's not in la la land. She knows exactly what's going on. She knows who's on the stand, what they're saying, how important it is, and is having these types of reactions. How about the courtroom itself, the atmosphere there?
The courtroom is, well, it's one of those where you have people traveling from all over the nation to be here. I met a mom and daughter from Portland, Oregon, who flew in just 2 days to be here and sit in the courtroom. So there are rules that you have to follow. You have to register for a seat, 24 hours ahead of time online. They sell out, but are reserved pretty quickly, Vinnie. Every day, there's a limited amount of seats, and it fills up inside the courtroom with members of media, public locally and from all over. And then there's a section reserved for family members in the middle. So the marshals and deputies inside the courtroom run a tight ship, and there are strict rules you have to follow. And they've already kicked out one person, and they'll take your phone if it goes off. So people are obeying the rules. They're quiet. Usually in a courtroom before court starts or during a recess, people start chatting and it gets a little bit noisy. Not in this one, because we're all scared to get in trouble by the court staff. So that's kind of what it's like. And all eyes, are on Lori. As soon as she walks in, you can just tell people in the gallery, what is she doing now? How is she acting?
Now, a lot of the focus on Lori obviously is on the two children. And that's how the entire investigation began, looking for JJ, then looking for Tylee. But there's a third victim, which is Tammy Daybell, which was Chad's wife for, I think, like 28 years, something like that. 5 children, all grown up. Now she's gone. Here's Chad Daybell in a phone call describing what happened to Tammy.
I just want to testify that I know Tammy does. And the conspiracy theories, my sister-in-law's right behind it all, and I hope that you're not being influenced by that dark team.
I don't know who she is. I'm sorry, you said your sister-in-law? I don't even know her.
Oh, I know, but she's coming up with the same type of theories. Mm-hmm. And it's just not true. My own children were there. They testified that Tammy had been getting weaker and sick, and I begged her to go to the doctor. Her heart was failing her. She was physically falling apart, but she hates doctors. And she just passed away. That's how it happened. My son Garth was right there with me the whole time. My kids were at the house within 20 minutes of her passing. There were 2 coroners. They checked her out right there on the bed. All these conspiracy theories just make me sick to my stomach. Just absolutely sick. I know I've been told for years that Tammy would pass away at a young age. And I had no idea that Lori would even be a part of my life. I just knew that my life had 2 segments. And that I know Tammy's on a special mission and she's with my kids. She's visited them. There's so much, Melanie, that you just have to have faith. And this is not some sort of master plan. There's no way Lori and I should have ever come up with this.
That one line gets me, Chanley. She just passed away. The people don't just pass away. That's not how it works. She just passed away. Mm-hmm. That's all there is to it. It's that simple. Right. What are prosecutors saying happened to Tammy here?
Well, that she was asphyxiated. She was murdered sometime. The timeline is still shaping up. So it looks like Alex Cox is in the area of the Daybell home the evening before she's found deceased in the bed, allegedly. And so I believe they said in opening statements that even though Garth lived at the home at the time, he had gone to work that evening. So there was a window where he wasn't home before he came back to go to sleep. So they're shaping it up to Garth is gone, Alex Cox is nearby, Chad is at home. A lot of communications between all 3, Chad, Lori, Alex at this time, all day leading up to it. And then she's found deceased the next day. And they say she's super healthy. she wasn't on very many prescriptions, that she didn't go to the doctor that often because she was never sick. I talked to some of her family members. They say she was a runner. She would go out and work in the yard. She had her garden and her ducks that she would raise, and she would walk the dogs, Vinny. So the testimony is the opposite of what we just heard Chad say. Yeah,
she didn't just pass away. That's not what happened. I don't think the jury's going to believe she just passed away either. It's amazing. Alex Cox appears to be the hitman for this cult. He's taking everyone out. He ends up dead himself. Like I said, he had some sort of a physical episode on the toilet and then died at the hospital later. Still sketchy there as well. I think in another podcast, we'll dive a little deeper into that. But Chanley Painter, thank you so much. You're out there in Boise. You'll be there till the end of this case. She's on my show every night, folks, giving us every detail right on Court TV, your front row seat to justice. Thanks so much, Chanley.
Thanks, Benny.
All right, folks, we are out of time for this episode of the Court TV podcast. Once again, thank you so much for downloading. And make sure, if you're interested in this case, which I don't know why you wouldn't be, you can watch my show every night from 8 to 10 p.m. And then we have coverage and updates all day long on Court TV. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thanks for listening. Have a great week. And as always, please don't forget to hug the kids.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to courttv.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.